In the dumpster behind Checkers on 29th.
So you find a dead girl in your club.
They were the most popular rock band of the 1970s.
It was a big deal in '77 when an American band could sell 80,000 tickets.
Led by a pair of fiery and unpredictable performers.
Joe Perry and Steven Tyler were just great on stage together.
It was a marriage made in heaven.
Until a drug-fueled mid-career meltdown sent them straight to the bargain bins.
When we heard he left the band, we thought that was the end of Aerosmith.
It was unbelievable to see how they had fallen from grace so quickly.
But a music miracle gave the band a second chance at success.
We realized that if we wanted the band to work, we had to get clean.
And turned Aerosmith into the greatest rock and roll comeback story of all time.
Very few people get that once. No one really gets it twice. It's a remarkable achievement.
High decibels, hard drugs, and backstage drama. Aerosmith.
The people love Aerosmith. They love the rock and roll.
In 1979, Aerosmith was the biggest rock act in the country, but their soaring career was about to come crashing down to earth in a single night in Cleveland. Aerosmith's success had been built upon the creative but volatile partnership between frontman Steven Tyler and lead guitarist Joe Perry. But now that partnership was breaking down.
Well, as the 70s went on, tension was escalating in the band, drug use was escalating in the band.
There were, obviously the toxic twins, Joe and Steven, and they were all drinking and getting high.
Steven Tyler and Joe Perry just could not stand each other. I mean, things had just gotten bad where they didn't want to be in a room together, didn't want to work together, certainly didn't want to perform together.
Steven and Joe sometimes only communicated with each other by screaming into each other's ears on stage.
You can see that Joe's not happy. I don't know that anybody was happy at that point.
It was on July 28th, 1979, at a show in Cleveland where it kind of all came to a head.
Backstage, Steven and Joe had this huge blowout. They're at each other's throats.
We were pretty burned out, and instead of taking the vacation, we let loose on each other.
And Joe said to Steven, "Why don't I just leave the band?" Steven said right back to Joe, "Go ahead and effing go, I don't care." And so then he left the band, and he swore that he would never step on stage with Aerosmith again.
It would be remembered as one of the biggest implosions in rock history. It's the great paradox of Aerosmith. The foundations of the band are built on the passionate songwriting partnership of Steven Tyler and Joe Perry. But their clashing personalities also made for one of the most turbulent stories in music. The roots of Aerosmith begin in Yonkers, New York, where Steven Tyler was born on March 26, 1948, to parents Victor and Susan. From his early years, he seemed destined for the stage.
Victor was a very accomplished piano player who played in big bands, and so Steven comes from a very musical milieu. Steven Tyler's first professional gigs were as the drummer of his father's band.
Steven Tyler grew up with British invasion music. Bands like the Rolling Stones, like the Yardbirds. If like the Rolling Stones were in town, he would find out what clubs they were going to and go sit behind them and watch them. He had that kind of passion about the music.
Steven was always focused on what he wanted to do. He wanted to be a rock star. He didn't want to be restricted to those drums. He wanted to be out in front dancing, and making the crowd do what he wanted to do because he knew he had that power inside him.
It would take a chance meeting some 400 miles from the big city in Sunapee, New Hampshire to set Steven's aspirations of stardom into motion. It was there in the summer of 1969 that Steven caught a performance by local act The Jam Band, featuring a 17-year-old Tom Hamilton on bass and an 18-year-old guitarist named Joe Perry.
We just grew up in a small town just outside of Boston, not far from Foxborough. My father was the town treasurer, and my mother was the gym teacher at the little high school. It was a pretty normal childhood. When I was around 10 or 12, my parents bought me this Silvertone acoustic. and I'd play along with songs on the radio. When the Beatles movie came out, that was one of the inspirations that made me want to actually form a band.
Watching Joe Perry play on stage, Steven Tyler had a rock and roll revelation.
Joe had the feel and the charisma and that stage presence that Steven was looking for. A guy who gets on stage, lets his hair down, and lets his music do the talking.
Steven Tyler and Joe Perry get a chance to jam together and instantly click. Joe Perry and Tom Hamilton were playing together, and they decided to move their band to Boston and it was the nearest big town and try and make it there. And Steven Tyler decided, if these are the guys I want to play with, I got to move there as well. I got to move where they're going.
In summer 1970, 22-year-old Steven Tyler joined 19-year-old Joe Perry in Boston to form Aerosmith. Joe's New Hampshire cohort, Tom Hamilton, filled in on bass. Another Yonkers boy, Joey Kramer, sat at the drums, and Ray Tabano played rhythm guitar, soon to be replaced by Brad Whitford. And they weren't just a band, they were housemates.
The band had a communal house at 1325 Commonwealth Avenue near Boston University.
It was like Animal House. The house was never empty. There was always somebody in, people coming in and out all the time. There was always a party going on.
And the parties would draw girls, and the girls in turn would draw other musicians and especially drug dealers. And so from pretty much the beginning, the Aerosmith scene was a particularly drug-soaked one.
But it wasn't all one big party. Aerosmith was working hard to become the best band in Boston. And it was there that they honed their signature sound and their flamboyant stadium-ready look.
They worked very hard to become a professional band. They started out rehearsing in a place called the Fenway Theater on Massachusetts Avenue in Boston.
Literally played to eat and live. We were always just trying to make our rent.
We were playing high schools, in clubs. We used to get paid like $125. Okay, there was 5 of us, and we had this roadie, we had a truck, we had all the equipment. After everything was paid for, we'd wind up with like about 19 cents each.
We were doing Rolling Stones and Yardbirds, and basically we were imitating the British invasion.
They had stage clothes. They looked like an English rock band. They had long hair that was considered indecently long at the time. And they had the moves.
In the early days, they'd play till they found some idea. Steven would say, "What was that? Go work with that." Joe would go off and turn an idea into a song, put chords and a melody to it, give it some shape, and then Steven would write lyrics to that.
We were constantly under Steven's tutelage about learning some of the dynamics of how you make the song sound a little more professional.
Steven Tyler tortured their poor drummer Joey Kramer almost to death because Steven was a drummer himself and he wanted the thing to flow in a certain way.
But it wasn't just Joey Kramer who bristled at Steven's perfectionism. Already, the relationship between Perry and Tyler was growing tense.
I know from that first gig that they played at Nipmuc Regional High School, Steven kept telling Joe that he was playing too loud, and Joe wouldn't turn down. And at the end of the gig, Steven screamed at him, "My ears are bleeding, you've got to turn down." But Joe never wanted to turn down. He wanted to play really loud, hard rock.
I refused to go into whatever dressing room we had when the show was over because they were frighteningly explosive arguments.
Steven and Joe may have fought about the music, but together they were forging an incendiary new sound that was landing the band better gigs. And audiences were starting to take notice.
They just started touring and playing everywhere they could and started building up a regional following in New England by taking to the road in the van and playing everywhere that would have them.
Aerosmith was gaining this great reputation for having this really dynamic, energetic live show.
In spring of 1972, Aerosmith even attracted the attention of a hotshot New York City management team, Stephen Leber and David Krebs, who'd made a name for themselves handling glam rock band, the New York Dolls. They were determined to get Aerosmith a major label deal.
Leber and Krebs knew that they needed to showcase Aerosmith live in New York City. It's not something that's going to come across bringing in a demo tape. They had to get them on a stage in front of people. And Max's Kansas City was, the hottest place, really the epicenter of New York rock and roll.
That was a big deal for us. Because we're basically a Boston, New England band. No one knew us outside of that neighborhood.
But the prospect of playing in front of the most powerful men in the music business was daunting.
This was their shot. They were coming to New York City. They were playing the biggest club in town. Clive Davis, who was running Columbia Records, the top executive in town, was there. If you don't have it that night, you're driving back to Boston.
The pressure was on, but Aerosmith did not disappoint.
Aerosmith got up on stage, they played their set, and they delivered, and they showed what they were capable of.
Clive was impressed enough to take us aside and put his arm around Steven's shoulder and said, "You're going to be a big star."
These were the words that Steven Tyler had been aching to hear his entire life.
Clive Davis probably saw what we saw, like an American Stones or an American Zeppelin, but I think really people were just looking for a great American rock band, and they found one in Aerosmith.
By the summer of 1972, the band that had been scraping by on $125 a gig was signed to Columbia Records for a then astonishing sum of $125,000. But if Aerosmith thought that a recording contract would mean instant success, they were wrong.
Yes, Virginia, there is a Santa Claus.
Macy's, please.
He exists just as certainly as love and generosity exist. How dreary would be the world if there were no Santa Claus? He lives and lives forever.
Bring your letter to Santa into Macy's, and we'll donate to the Make-A-Wish Foundation. Together, we'll collect 1 million reasons to believe.
When America coughs, America has Delsum, the only cough liquid that controls a cough for a full 12 hours, all day or all night. So have a good day, America. Thank you, Delsum. America's only 12-hour cough liquid.
You disgust me.
Prove it.
Enough's enough. Decon baits are 50% stronger than the competition and can kill in one feeding. Decon, get out.
If you have an accident, the last thing you want is for your insurance rates to go up. With accident forgiveness from Nationwide Insurance, they won't. After the first accident, your rates stay right where they are, kinda like it never even happened. I am Lori Rigsby, and I am on your side. Switch to Nationwide Insurance now.
Call 1-877-NATIONWIDE or a local agent.
Come to Lowe's for everything you need to lower your energy bills, like 10% off Energy Star appliances and lighting, WaterSense faucets and toilets, and other weatherization products. Use your Lowe's consumer credit card and pay nothing for 12 months on single receipt purchases of $299 or more.
Pristine and perfect. Finish dishwasher cleaner. Used once a month. Cleans limescale and grease in hard-to-reach places to help maintain your dishwasher performance. Finish the diamond standard.
This.
Add digital phone and save. Add Roadrunner and save. Now current customers can save up to $500 a year and get our best cable rate. Just add Roadrunner and digital phone to get Time Warner Cable's all the best triple play. 3 great services, each just $33 a month for the first year. Call 1-877-881-5352. Add and save.
Problems with varicose veins, leg pain, or fatigue? Unsightly spider veins? Well, you're not alone. Call Soho Vein, where we specialize in the treatment of varicose veins. Dr. Kasuk, with his many years of experience, uses the most advanced, minimally invasive treatments, eliminating your problems with varicose and spider veins without pain, giving rapid results. Visit Dr. Kasuk's office in Soho, Brooklyn today. Call 888-ZIP-VEIN or visit us on the web at sohovein.com.
Fan? Well, prove it. Go to aetv.com/shop to get geared up with the hottest fan gear from your favorite shows.
For 3 years, Aerosmith had been building a Boston fan base through hard work and relentless touring. In 1972, Columbia Records took notice, signing the band to a $125,000 recording contract. The boys from Boston seemed to be on their way to stardom. That is, until their self-titled debut was released in January 1973.
Aerosmith's first album came out and did nothing. No one played it. The single was Dream On, didn't get played on the radio. The record didn't get reviewed in Rolling Stone.
You would think that a debut album that has Dream On it would be the instant entree to rock superstardom. It wasn't. It was kind of a lukewarm reception initially.
To make matters worse, Aerosmith faced stiff competition from another debut artist.
The same week that Aerosmith's first album came out, Columbia Records also released a first album by a rock musician named Springsteen.
For every dollar that they spent on promoting Aerosmith, they spent $100 promoting Bruce Springsteen. Without any support from the label, the album didn't really do much at all.
The few critics who were paying attention compared the band to their rock idols, and they didn't mean it as a compliment.
Aerosmith was compared to the Rolling Stones, and not favorably. Steven looked a little bit like Mick. Joe looked a little bit like Keith Richards.
That's the God-given body and face they have. What are they supposed to do about it, you know? So it was just one of those things that, you know, the writers could latch on to and kick this around for a long time.
The album was a commercial disaster, selling a scant 30,000 copies, and Columbia Records was reluctant to release a second Aerosmith album.
Clive Davis, who was at Columbia at the time, wasn't going to do it. He calls him up, he says, "We're not going to put the second record out." David Krebs, the band's manager, called up Columbia and said, "Just give us a little more time. We can build an audience on our own."
Aerosmith's management sent them on a grassroots tour that crisscrossed the nation. It was a last-ditch effort to sell the band directly to fans.
And they decided, we're going to take the slow, long route and try to build up an audience. They took it to the road, and they went face-to-face with the fans, and they earned their respect, one show at a time.
Well, we played every place and every night that we could. And I remember many times playing 2 shows a day, like playing like at a college outdoor festival in the afternoon and then playing a club that night.
The 1973 tour was exhausting, but it was paying off. Aerosmith's relentless show schedule was slowly earning them a fan base across the country.
The chemistry between Steven Tyler and Joe Perry was what was compelling people to come see these guys, to go back and tell their friends, next time you gotta come with me to see these guys.
They were known for putting on a good show. I mean, Aerosmith were road warriors, they were a live band. They had swagger, they had soul.
Their loud, lusty hard rock especially struck a nerve with a specific group of rock fans.
They had this fan base growing, and they really played toward this working-class teenage crowd.
It was definitely, you know, the pot-smoking, hard-drinking, sex-having teenagers that were out there loving Aerosmith, no question about it.
Joe Perry called the band's audience the Blue Army because they'd show up at these gigs and there'd be thousands of kids in denim jackets, jeans. They all looked alike. It looked like this huge sea of blue high school kids with very long hair.
After a year of constant touring, Aerosmith was earning the audience their record label could not reach. Columbia relented and gave the band their second album. But would a new fan base translate into album sales? In 1974, the band released its sophomore effort, Get Your Wings.
So what happens is Get Your Wings comes out and it sells.
There were these fans who were waiting for an Aerosmith record, who'd seen them play, and wanted the reason to go buy an Aerosmith record. By the spring of 1975, Get Your Wings is a gold record, and now Aerosmith's in the big leagues.
When we came back to Boston, the record had broken here, and all of a sudden, we had gone from playing to 300 people, we were playing to 2,000 people a night, and it was like mind-blowing.
From the summer of '74 onward, Aerosmith was slowly but surely gaining nationwide notoriety. But the strain of the steady travel and nightly performances was beginning to show, especially in the relationship between Joe Perry and Steven Tyler.
You really have 2 people who are almost like mirror images of each other. Tyler, the extremely flamboyant guy, who underneath that is actually kind of very musicianly. And you have Joe Perry, on the other hand, who's kind of quieter, much more soft-spoken, but who inside is this kind of like wild rock and roll guy. So this doubleness between them is part of what gives their creative relationship a charge, but it's also what kind of drives them crazy about each other.
From the beginning, this clash of personalities was kind of built into Aerosmith. These sort of little personality differences get amplified by this constant touring, by the repetition of it, the grueling part of it.
Also fueling the tension was Joe Perry's new girlfriend.
Around this time, Joe Perry started seeing a woman named Alyssa Jarrett.
She became very influential in the Aerosmith story because she had a lot of influence over Joe. She was always to be seen at the side of the stage, very close to where he stood.
Joe and Steven had been together writing and creating this band, and then Joe gets married and is very in love with Alyssa, and so they became a unit, and I could see that pulling Joe away from Steven. Steven lost a little bit of Joe to Alyssa.
As Aerosmith's career took off, infighting began to poison everything they'd achieved. But it wouldn't be the only toxic element to threaten Aerosmith.
It's been 20 years since we've been in the studio.
How are we going to make this happen? We're letting cameras into our life for the very first time.
The Jacksons, a family dynasty. Sunday, December 13th at 9 on A&E.
Get the taste of a home-cooked meal at work with new Marie Callender's Homestyle Creations. A delicious meal made fresh from your desk. Just cook them, strain them, mix them. Marie Callender's Homestyle Creations. A little touch of home for lunch. Find them in the super pasta aisle.
This might not be the best time to sell a home.
But we just can't wait for the market to heat up.
Need to sell? RE/MAX agents have the experience to get the job done. Nobody sells more real estate than RE/MAX. Where do you want to be?
Ladies and gentlemen, Carlos and Maria.
Does anyone have a Ricola?
Troublesome cough? Soothe it with a naturally effective Ricola. Now, try mixed berry with vitamin C.
If you want to stay warm and cuddly, then you need to put on a Snuggie. It's the blanket with sleeves that keeps you totally warm while your hands stay free. That's right! Perfect for men, women, and children love them too. And now, there's even a Snuggie for your dog. Available in a variety of hot new colors that'll keep you cozy from head to toe and totally warm wherever you go. Snuggie is available at retail stores everywhere. So if you want to be warm and cuddly, it's time to get on your Snuggie. That's right!
Right now, Mrs. Jones is freeing herself from restrictive calling circles and switching her entire family to Sprint. That way, her daughter isn't limited to lame calling plans. Her son can talk all day long. And while on the Sprint network, if her husband Puck knows any mobile phone nationwide,
"Oh, this is Flavor Flav. Who's this?"
it's no big deal. Welcome to the Now Network. Get any mobile anytime for just $42.50 a month per line with unlimited text and data. And right now, buy a BlackBerry Curve for $49.99 and get a second one free. Sprint, the Now Network.
Your home sees a lot of life, and so does new Eric iMotion. It's the only continuous air freshener with a smart motion sensor, so it sees when there is more activity and automatically adjusts the fragrance. It creates the perfect scent in your home's busiest places. Eric Freshmatic Ultra with iMotion gives you freshness where life happens. Eric, it's good to be home.
After 5 years together, Aerosmith had survived the failure of their first album by building a massive fan base through constant touring. And these fans demonstrated their loyalty where it mattered most. The band's second album, Get Your Wings, went gold. In April 1975, they released Toys in the Attic. Propelled by the now classic single Sweet Emotion, the album sold 5 million copies. The boys from Boston were getting big and wealthy.
They were starting to appear on TV. They were starting to move out of clubs and theaters into hockey rinks and basketball arenas, and it was starting to get really big.
It was a big deal in '77 when an American band could sell 80,000 tickets at a place like the Silver Dome in Michigan. There were not a lot of American bands doing it at the time. It was mostly British bands. So this was a huge deal for an American artist.
Suddenly you're living in better conditions. You're staying in better hotels, buy nicer guitars, buy your own car, and life's good.
I did a spread for Cream magazines called Stars Cars, and Joe and Joey had Corvettes and Steven. That wasn't his thing. He did have an airplane, though. We used to have a ritual. We'd get paid in the smallest bills we could, and then we'd throw it all up in the air. and just kind of wallow in it a little bit. And it went from being $300 to $3,000. And that ritual went on for quite a while until it started to be too much money to carry around. You know, it would have needed an armored truck. But as fast as it came in, it went out too.
The once middle-class boys of Aerosmith could now afford all the luxuries of the rock star lifestyle, and its vices as well.
Throughout their rapid ascent in the 70s, Aerosmith was just surrounded by drugs, and drugs had always been associated with the band. Everybody knew about it.
One of Steven Tyler's classic trademarks is the scarf-draped microphone. And what most people don't know was that the scarves had a function that was beyond merely decorative. There were little pockets sewn in the bottom of them, and Steven kept drugs in the pockets of these scarves. It got out of hand. And this is when somebody in some media dubbed Steven Tyler and Joe Perry the Toxic Twins. And it stuck, this nickname, because it was so true.
They were, without a doubt, the hardest partiers. You know, we're not talking, you know, a joint and a couple of beers. You know, they were using narcotics. And narcotics are not a social drug in any sense of the word.
Their drug use reached a new, more self-destructive level in 1977 when Aerosmith retreated to a former seminary in Armonk, New York, called the Cenacle, to record the album Draw the Line.
What I had heard about the recording sessions at the Cenacle was just that the guys were all really out of their minds and all off in different areas in their own rooms. The alcoholism and the addiction was so full-blown at that time.
We just brought all our toys up there and a lot of partying going on, and a lot of the focus wasn't on the music.
The music stopped being their passion and drugs started being their passion, which is the death of most great bands.
Aerosmith's excessive drug use was threatening to sabotage their fifth album.
They had writer's block. They were struggling to come up with the tunes. I had some photos of Steven and Joe side by side with a piece of paper. They just had their heads down like, we can't do it. We can't find it. And I think that was the lowest I ever saw them.
Joe and Steven weren't the only ones disappointed. When Aerosmith finally delivered Draw the Line, the label and fans were unimpressed.
The Draw the Line album was months over schedule, and it didn't really have the same impact commercially or critically that the previous album did.
They went from being a great group to a good group that was clearly not in control of themselves.
Meanwhile, Joe's marriage to Alyssa was one of the factors continuing to drive a wedge between Aerosmith's two band leaders.
There were all sorts of feuds, but when the drugs are toxic, the behavior becomes toxic.
We were pretty burned out, and instead of taking the vacation, we let loose on each other.
And I think as the fame increased, drugs increased, and the issues between Steven and Joe diminished the creativity between the two of them, the later 70s became a hard time.
Infighting and substance abuse were driving Aerosmith apart. Then, at a July 1979 concert, the band reached a crisis point.
It's July 1979. Aerosmith is in Cleveland. No one's getting along very well. People were grouchy. Everyone said the gig sucked. Backstage, after this gig, Joe's wife, Alyssa, got into it with Tom Hamilton's wife, Terry, and some milk was thrown. There was a battle that involved spilled milk, and Joe Perry walked out and left Aerosmith.
Kind of shows how ludicrous it was that it was actually over the cliche of the spilt milk.
Joe really perceived as the breaking point, the final straw, that now his wife was getting disrespected and that these guys just couldn't operate as a unit anymore. And after that show, he stormed backstage to Steven's dressing room and they got into a big fight, and he said, "That's it, I'm done, I'm out of here." And Steven said, "You should be out of here, this is finished, I'm never playing with you again." And, you know, everybody thought that was the end of the band.
Why the hurry?
My mother-in-law will be here in an hour. Look at my carpet. If I steam clean, it'll be soaked for hours.
Why steam clean? Use Resolve Deep Clean Powder.
The moist powder removes ground-in dirt and deep cleans without soaking. So you can easily give your carpets a deep clean, and it's completely dry in 20 minutes. Look, this carpet will please any mother-in-law.
My carpet looks great.
Resolve Deep Clean Powder.
Now you can get the latest name brand HD TVs where you already save. Well, actually, just a few rows over in Walmart's expanded electronics department. Get unbeatable prices on today's latest HD TVs from Sony, Vizio, Philips, Sharp, and Samsung. They're a lot closer than you think. Save money, live better. Walmart.
Anxious about quitting cold turkey? Make that first step easier with the Nicoderm CQ patch. Nicoderm steps you down from nicotine gradually, doubling your chance for success. Nicoderm CQ, 3 steps, 10 weeks, and you're free.
We call it the American Renewal, and it means innovation that's helping doctors help patients. It's billions of dollars in healthcare advancements in things like early cancer detection and electronic medical records that'll mean better health for more people. Health imagination means never forgetting that health is everything.
The American Renewal is happening right now.
There are some things that might surprise you, like discovering that Canada Dry Ginger Ale is made from real ginger. It's a nice surprise. Canada Dry Ginger Ale. Real ginger, real taste.
Welcome to the modern world, people. Woolite isn't just for your delicates. It's for all your clothes. With Woolite Complete, you can wash everything from jeans to tees because it has the right balance of care and cleaning. And say goodbye to fading, shrinking, and stretching. After all, a lady never reveals the true age of her clothes. Woolite Complete cleans and cares for all your clothes.
The amount of decay is astounding.
I can't believe anybody could live this way. 2 years and you never told anyone.
Hoarders, season premiere, Monday, November 30th at 10. Only on A&E.
Over nearly a decade, Aerosmith had risen from a scrappy Boston band to one of the hardest touring and most successful rock acts in America. But uncontrolled drug and alcohol abuse was destroying all they'd worked so hard to achieve. Then, on July 28, 1979, mounting friction with lead singer Steven Tyler led Joe Perry to quit Aerosmith, leaving fan mates to wonder if the group could survive.
When we heard Joe Perry left the band, we thought that was the end of Aerosmith.
It's just not Aerosmith without Joe Perry.
People figured that the band would fall apart, but it didn't happen that way.
Surprising everyone, Aerosmith decided to carry on. Joe Perry was replaced with guitarist Jimmy Crespo in October 1979, but the magic was lost, and the fans were resistant.
People down front would be looking up at Steven Tyler and going, "Where's Joe?" And Steven Tyler got tired of this pretty quickly.
I didn't know that we could do it without Joe. Certainly didn't feel like we could do it.
Joe Perry leaving the band, for me, that was like, wait a minute, you gotta have Joe Perry in the band. It's like not having Steven in the band. It's just, to me, it wasn't Aerosmith.
The band that ended the 70s selling out 80,000-seat arenas seemed lost in the world of 80s rock.
They had slumped down to just playing the Orpheum Theater, which is 2,800 capacity, which is a long way from Boston Garden of, 18,000 and the stadiums that they played.
It was unbelievable to see how they had fallen from grace so quickly within a few years.
Steven was, I think, always sort of lost without Joe. I just saw him as suffering without that relationship.
Even without his toxic twin, Steven Tyler continued his heavy drug use.
They played a gig on a horrible night up in Portland. I think about 4 songs in, Steven was down on the stage.
He fell down right in front of me. I wasn't sure if he was alive. It was gut-wrenching.
And then Joe Baptista, the stage manager, came out and lifted Steven up with his arms and carried him off stage.
Things had just gotten bad. In 1980, Steven Tyler's on his motorcycle and he's wasted and the bike skids out of control. Trying to stop it, he rips up his heel, tears his foot up, and he's not able to perform. And being off of work for those 6 or 8 months just becomes the excuse to go deeper into the addiction and the abuse.
While Aerosmith was breaking down, Joe Perry had struck out on his own. In March 1980, his new band, the Joe Perry Project, released their debut album, Let the Music Do the Talking.
It was a great rock and roll band because Joe Perry was the lead guitarist, but it wasn't successful.
The Joe Perry Project still had Joe's groove, but still needed to be him and Steven. There's something about those 5 original guys in Aerosmith. It's got to be the 5.
Fans rejected Joe Perry's Aerosmith spin-off, and the steady stream of money dried up. But Joe continued to indulge himself like a high-earning rock star.
Joe was heavily involved with drugs, and eventually, as happens with drug addicts, you start to lose parts of your life.
Joe Perry was creatively and commercially bankrupt. He began taking stock of his own life. By 1982, he had left his wife, Alyssa.
I had to get out of that relationship. I knew it was killing me. Once I walked out the door, I just felt so free. That was the start of getting a whole new perspective on things.
Joe started dating a young fashion model named Billy Montgomery. Their relationship blossomed. Surprisingly, Billy knew little about Joe's illustrious past.
She was part of the punk underground scene in Boston, but she didn't know anything about Aerosmith. And we were driving along in the car one day, and Back in the Saddle came on. And I said, "That's my guitar right there." And she said, "No, you're kidding me." So I turned the radio up and I said, "That's my band." So it was pretty easy for her to say, "Why don't you get back with these guys?"
To me, it just made sense. I mean, you played with them before, try it. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. What do you have to lose?
Billy wasn't the only one pondering an Aerosmith reunion. The Joe Perry Project's manager was reaching the same conclusion.
So we played a gig in Boston, and after the gig, Joe had a friend, local disc jockey, Mark Parento, and he invited us back to his house to hang out. And Joe is passed out, so Mark is playing all the old Aerosmith records. And I got excited. I started to feel the music. And Mark looks at me and he said, "Tim, you have brothers, right?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "You fight with your brothers?" I said, "Of course." He says, "But you still love your brothers?" I said, "Of course. Do anything for them." And he says, "Joe and Steven are brothers." It was at that moment that I knew it was meant to be.
In early 1984, Tim arranged a lunch in New York City between Joe and Steven.
The lunch was a little bit of reminiscing, a lot of complaining, and then at one point I said, "Guys, let's talk about the future and let go of the past." Steven looks at me and says, "He's right. I think it's time, Joe." And Joe says, "I do too." That was the beginning of it all.
More discussions followed, and gradually the rift between the old rock and roll allies was healed.
Joe Perry and Steven Tyler are smart enough to know that they were meant to be together.
The truth is, as great as Joe is, he's greater when Steven's out there in front of him, and Steven is much, much better when Joe is behind him.
Once we helped Steven and Joe make up, getting the other guys, it was pretty easy because the energy had started and they did not want to miss the train.
They decided to give it a shot, and I think that Steven's ego and just how his passion for rock and roll meant he wanted it back. He knew what they had lost, and he wanted it back badly enough.
The first band rehearsal happened in Glen Ellen Country Club.
We were all kind of nervous. Steven and I were excited to have the band back, all of us together under one roof, and it was like starting over. It was really a lot of fun.
I saw Joe that day as he went off to the rehearsal. For the first time since I met him, he had a smile on his face. And for the first time, I could see his eyes. The magic was there. He was back. He was Joe Perry from Aerosmith.
In May of 1984, Aerosmith regrouped under the guidance of new manager Tim Collins. All the original members took the stage together for the first time in 5 years on the aptly named Back in the Saddle tour. The band was on the comeback trail, but it wouldn't be rock and roll that reignited their career. It would be hip-hop.
Come on, let's go.
When the world is speeding by for others,
Taser, hurry, calm down.
let's see things for what they are.
Get him, Johnny, get him.
expecting somebody else.
Steven Seagal Lawman premieres Wednesday, December 2nd at 10 on A&E. But you can catch it first on aetv.com/Seagal.
This is not like Hollywood. It's for real.
Log on Wednesday at 8 p.m. to get an exclusive look at the premiere episode.
A breakthrough in oral health technology gives you all-around protection and sensitivity relief. Try new Sensodyne Isoactive toothpaste. This revolutionary gel toothpaste transforms into a microfine foam while you brush. The foam penetrates hard-to-reach places to thoroughly clean your whole mouth and provide protection from sensitivity. Discover why 9 out of 10 dentists recommend Sensodyne. For all-around protection and sensitivity relief, try new Sensodyne Isoactive. Brand power, helping you buy better.
You disgust me.
Prove it.
Enough's enough. Decon baits are 50% stronger than the competition and can kill in one feeding. Decon, get out.
It's a revolutionary product.
The secret of youthful skin is in your genes. Lancome invents Genifique, youth-activating concentrate. Drop by drop, see the transformation. Clinically proven. See visibly younger skin in just 7 days.
It's like youthfulness in a jar.
Genifique by Lancome. The best of the season, all in the Lancome Beauty Box, only at Macy's.
When mucus keeps your child up at night, you need Mucinex Cough Mini Melts, the great tasting way to break up mucus and quiet coughing.
Mini Melts!
Mucinex Cough Mini Melts. Mucinex in, mucus out.
You don't drink every time you smoke, yet you smoke every time you drink. Drinking and smoking don't have to go together. Relearn life without cigarettes, free at becomeanx.org, a new way to think about quitting.
Fact: kitchen grease happens. So does bathroom scum. Fear not. There's Lysol 4-in-1 Lemon All-Purpose Cleaner. It's better on tough grease than the leading all-purpose cleaner. The leading bathroom cleaner can't beat it either. And it kills 99.9% of germs. Lysol 4-in-1 for the toughest places to clean. Lysol. Disinfect to protect. Also try Lysol 4-in-1 Pourables.
After 5 years as one of the world's top-selling rock acts, Aerosmith had suffered a major setback. In 1979, as differences with frontman Steven Tyler mounted, lead guitarist Joe Perry abruptly left the band. The band languished for 5 years before Perry returned to the fold.
They went out and did a reunion tour, and they were still messed up, but they kept their act together enough to at least get out there on stage and deliver the hits. It only sort of reintroduced them, but it didn't really help them.
To make their comeback complete, Aerosmith needed a hit, but the 1985 album Done with Mirrors was a creative and commercial disaster.
Done with Mirrors died a very quick death, actually. I remember Aerosmith always did something splashy with the Boston media for any album opening, and this time they had a night, literally, at the castle on the North Shore. A beautiful, sumptuous kind of evening, and then they brought everybody into a side room. It was a listening party for the new album, and the whole room just went like catatonic, because that was a terrible record. And everybody's looking at each other like, is this the Aerosmith record, or is this some bad Motley Crue outtakes, or I mean, what is this? So we could quickly surmise that was not going to go anywhere.
What went wrong with Done with Mirrors is that Aerosmith was out of touch. They had been using drugs, they had been out of the world. They weren't in the mainstream of life when they did that record.
It only sold 320,000 copies, which for Aerosmith was nothing.
But Aerosmith's comeback wasn't faltering just because of one failed album.
When Aerosmith got back together, the music world had completely transformed. You'd had all of these kind of very colorful pop groups from England making colorful videos.
It was so important in that era to have a video out there. When MTV got behind a video in that period of time, 9 out of 10 times, that artist would go platinum at least. That's how powerful music videos were.
Without MTV exposure, any new Aerosmith release would be destined for the bargain bins. The band didn't just need a hit, they needed a music video miracle. In 1986, help came from a most unlikely place.
Run DMC were a rap trio from Hollis, Queens. Rick Rubin, the producer, was helping them by helping them pull pieces of rock and roll into the hip-hop world. Nobody had done that before.
Run DMC had been fans of Aerosmith for years. They just didn't know it.
We was in a studio and we was like, yo, we need another rock song. So I was like, yo, Jay, I always love Toys in the Attic. Yo, let's loop that. We was just gonna sample it. Rick Rubin walks in. And Rick Rubin sees me and Jay in the studio and he hears the record and he goes, yo guys, do y'all know what that is? And me and Jay turn to Rick and we're like, yeah, that's Toys in the Attic. He's like, nah, man, the name of that song is Walk This Way. The group is Aerosmith. And he goes to give us the 411 on Aerosmith. These guys were gods, rock gods, but they're not doing too good. And then Rick goes, yo, y'all should make the record over.
But at the time, covering a classic rock song was unthinkable for a young hip-hop act.
We had never heard the lyrics. So we go in the basement, we put the record on the turntable, and we let it play. We got on the phone, yelled, crying, this is hillbilly gibberish, we are not doing this, we'll never do this.
But producer Rick Rubin convinced Run DMC to give it a shot, and then he upped the ante. The rappers would do more than remake Walk This Way. They'd record it in collaboration with Aerosmith to create a revolutionary rap-rock hybrid.
Run DMC's people call Aerosmith's people and they say, we're cutting Walk This Way and we want Steve and Joe on the track.
It was really a smart move by Rick Rubin to have us come and play on it, but putting some electric guitars on the rap really made it accessible to more people.
Steven wanted to roll the dice because the music moved him.
On March 9th, 1986, Aerosmith met the young hip-hop act at Magic Venture Studio in Manhattan for an unusual partnership. The two groups were separated by musical style, age, and race. But when the music started flowing, Aerosmith and Run DMC quickly found common ground.
Got in there, Joe was on the guitar, Jay was doing a scratch, Joe did our verse, Steven went in and did his first, and it was a rap. Truly amazing. Seemed like we've worked together forever. It just gelled together. It was amazing.
Released in May 1986, the single was a smash hit, eventually going gold. But the best was yet to come. That summer, MTV aired the music video for Walk This Way, which featured Steven Tyler and Perry literally breaking down walls to perform with Run DMC.
I mean, the whole video was symbolic. It was like, you got these two powerful forces working against each other. Then they get so frustrated that they have to confront each other. And it just turns into a beautiful unity of, music.
Run DMC's cover version of Walk This Way quickly became the most requested and the most played video of MTV.
Walk This Way was really the beginning of the second coming.
All of a sudden, it was kind of the second generation of 9th and 10th graders who took one look at this and said, wow, who are these guys? So it was really the thing that launched their career into the stratosphere for the second time.
It was a marriage made in heaven.
Recharged by rap, the new version of Walk This Way hit #4 on the Billboard Top 100, outperforming even the original version of the song. And for the first time in 10 years, Aerosmith was back in the top 40. But as their careers rebounded, the old specter of drugs would loom over the band once again.
100 thread count. Do you like them? No, you like them. I love that. Good. Take it out. Take it out. Honey, look. Soft. Feel how soft. Oh.
I do not get it. Do you?
Yes.
Next year, I'm giving her a pillow.
Kmart makes Christmas count with great gifts like 400 thread count Jacqueline Smith sheet sets, plus this complete bed set and Kenmore cookware just $89.99. Give everyday luxury at a Kmart price.
They're smart, and there's Kmart smart.
When America coughs, America has Delsum, the only cough liquid that controls a cough for a full 12 hours, all day or all night. So have a good day, America.
Thank you, Delsum.
America's only 12-hour cough liquid.
We call it the AmeriNewal because we believe in creating cleaner energy that creates new jobs, being the #1 manufacturer of wind turbines in America, and developing lower-emission, fuel-efficient aircraft engines. Eco-imagination means growing the green economy by harnessing our most powerful resource, imagination.
The American renewal is happening right now.
I like to eat healthy, but I heard some foods are pretty acidic and can weaken tooth enamel.
Introducing Colgate Total Enamel Strength. It strengthens enamel and fights germs for 12 hours.
Hey, I love a strong smile.
New Colgate Total Enamel Strength.
Now, sports were meant to be watched in HD, and with Time Warner Cable, you get every game from all 9 New York teams in HD. Verizon Fios, you don't. That's crazy. I mean, when your team wins, you want to watch them win in high definition. And also, you want to watch the losers lose in high definition. You want to see those loser high-definition tears rolling down their high-definition faces as they slink back to their loser locker rooms and feel like losers in HD.
All the HD games from all 9 New York sports teams, Verizon Fios doesn't have them. Time Warner Cable does. Time Warner Cable, the power of you.
I spent 10 years blinded, but with RWA, I could see.
Bucky taught me the ethic of hard work. And I went from cleaning the gutter to melting the butter.
What I'm doing now is giving animals a second chance. And the Doe Fund did that for me.
Please, support the Doe Fund. We make people independent, and then they don't need your money anymore.
Ready?
Willing
and able.
Get ready, guys. Go! Come on, you punk! I know you're here! Yeah! We are in pursuit! Get it, Leroy, get it! Freeze now!
For the first half of the 80s, rock group Aerosmith was going nowhere but down. Even after the return of wayward guitarist Joe Perry, the band was struggling to recapture its fan base. Then the rap group Run DMC enlisted their help on a hip-hop remake of Aerosmith's 1977 single, Walk This Way. The band was back, but the demons that plagued them for a decade were back as well.
At this point, Aerosmith were relevant again in pop culture. I mean, they were a credible band again, but they still had the same problems.
The drugs that got completely crazy, totally out of control. In fact, I had to hire people to keep the drug dealers and all of the old friends who would be coming around just for bragging rights. So we had to just surround them with this army of security to keep them, basically to keep them alive. It was pretty wild.
And Tim committed to righting the Aerosmith ship. I called him the snowplow. The band is sort of in back of him and he's pushing away all the dope dealers that they have. It was an issue because they had a connection in every city.
Tim's efforts to curb the band's still heavy drug use were successful, at least to begin with. One night in Springfield, Illinois, a drug dealer slipped through his defenses.
And at one gig, it was in Illinois, Stephen got high before the show, and Stephen slipped, fell off the stage.
Stephen did a little too much of something that made him a little woozy on stage. He fell off the stage, and there was just pandemonium in the hall. And what happened next was I heard the paramedics say, "I think he's dead." And it was at that point that I went, I gotta get a real expert to straighten this situation out.
Manager Collins knew he had to keep Steven Tyler away from drugs at all costs.
I did my own research on sobriety, and I got connected to this incredible man in New York, Dr. Lou Cox, and his specialty was interventions. But Lou told me if they're hanging around with drug addicts, they're gonna go back into the drugs. So I look him in the eye and I say, "You're trying to tell me that everybody's gotta get sober?" And he goes, "That's what I'm telling you."
But that meant winning the support of another of Aerosmith's most conspicuous drug abusers.
I sat down with Joe and I said, "Joe, if you and I don't get sober, there's not a prayer that Steven's gonna do it."
Talked about it for a while, and but I knew that something had to change. But my wife Billy was pregnant and closing in on the 9-month, and I said, "All right, I'll go away after my son is born because I want to be there for when he's born."
Joe was ready. He got some help. So that down, I had a partner again. It was Joe and I, and that's where it had all started for me.
After a decade of drug abuse, Joe Perry agreed to get clean. With his help, Tim Collins went about the arduous task of making the rest of Aerosmith drug-free, starting with Steven Tyler.
I call up Steven, and I say, Steven, I need you in my office tomorrow morning at 7 a.m.
The band told him to show up early one morning to be interviewed by the BBC for an upcoming English tour. And Steven gets there at 7 o'clock in the morning, and the rest of the band is there, and they've all got these legal-sized pads of paper in front of them. On the pads were written all the stuff that they didn't like about Steven. And they went around the table, and he realized that this was going to be an intervention, and he completely freaked out.
Most interventions take about an hour and a half, 2 hours tops. This one lasted about 10 hours, back and forth. It was so intense.
He was like, what, me? You know? You're all just as bad as I am. Why should I be singled out?
And it took hours and hours and hours, and eventually he came around and he said, all right, I'll go to rehab. I'll go tomorrow. And they'll go, no, Steven. We've got a bag packed for you. There's a plane waiting that's taking you off to rehab.
Beleaguered and broken down, Steven Tyler flew to a rehabilitation center in Pennsylvania, where he would endure a grueling 45-day detoxification process. He emerged drug-free and determined to push his bandmates into rehab as well.
After Steven went to treatment, I knew the other guys would follow suit.
Tim Collins convinced them at the end of the day that they all had to be sober.
I knew they didn't have a choice. If they were going to be in Aerosmith, there's no way that Steven Tyler was going to let them stay in the band if they didn't follow suit. It's just the way the dynamics of the band worked.
The remaining members, Tom Hamilton, Brad Whitford, and Joey Kramer, soon followed Steven's lead. And for the first time in their 16-year career, the bad boys from Boston were drug-free.
Hey, this is Joe Perry.
And Steven Tyler from Aerosmith.
Clean and sober, they cranked out the album Permanent Vacation in the summer of 1987. Boasting hit singles like Angel and Dude Looks Like a Lady, it was a critical and commercial smash.
They had it back with Permanent Vacation. That was a record where it all was right again, and all of a sudden, wow, the magic is back.
My initial reaction to Permanent Vacation was that here's a band revitalized. I mean, they sounded fresh. They sounded like they were enjoying themselves again.
Not only did they make a great new record, but they were performing at the top of their game, better than they had ever played live. Steven was doing backflips on the stage. It was incredible to watch.
Aerosmith followed the success of Permanent Vacation with 1989's Pump, which delivered the hits What It Takes and Janie's Got a Gun. Get a Grip arrived in 1993 with still more successful singles like Crazy, Cryin', and Amazing. Together, these three albums sold 19 million copies in the US alone. Aerosmith's second act was overshadowing even their 70s heyday.
There was no one on their level as a hard rock band who could really even touch them.
In '94, they played Woodstock. In 2001, they played the Super Bowl halftime show. And they had all these really high-profile gigs.
They became a band that won Grammys, that won MTV Awards. They became professional. Aerosmith was the biggest band in America in the 70s for a long period and lost the throne. And then, miraculously, somewhere in the 80s into the 90s, they regained that mantle. Very few people get that once. No one really gets it twice. So it's a remarkable achievement.
The people love Aerosmith. They love to rock and roll.
And Aerosmith has continued to churn out hits. Since beating back drug addiction in 1986, the band has released 6 platinum albums. In 2005, Joe Perry released a self-titled solo work that earned critical praise and a Grammy nomination. Still higher praise came when Aerosmith joined the ranks of their music heroes in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
I think the Hall of Fame was the most nervous I've been in my entire life playing. I'm just looking out there at Keith Richards and Jeff Beck, and I was a mess.
The fact that they're in the same place now, where the Rolling Stones are, where the Yardbirds are, in the course of rock history, you see them in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, they deserve to be there.
With a career spanning nearly 4 decades, Aerosmith has weathered defections and drug addiction, not only to come back, but to become more popular than ever, ranking as the best-selling hard rock band of all time.
Aerosmith's been around for over 30 years, and they're still kicking.
And the fact that they turned their complete career around, that was going straight down, it was like a train going into a brick wall without any brakes, and to become one of the most respected and loved bands in the history of American rock music, it's a pretty incredible feat. Aerosmith are truly one of the greatest American rock bands of all time.
Somebody's watching out for us, it feels like, a little bit, you know? Or maybe they just like the music as much as we do.
A lot of acts have broken up. Aerosmith still comes out like the Rolling Stones. They still play like adolescents. They connect with some sort of energy ball. They play excellent show after excellent show, and there's no reason to think it's going to stop now.